Good morning, and welcome to CMajor Before the Show. Thank you so much for getting up early to hear what we have to say this morning. It's an early Saturday morning here in the greater New York City area, and we are addressing a very important topic, a topic that you are telling me that's important to you. We have some student shout-outs today. We have lots of things to cover, so we'll try to do it in the shortest amount of time that we can, but I'm already feeling like this is going to be part 2, that we have another part to this episode that will need to take place just so that we cover everything completely that I'm hearing you say to me as I'm out and about in the greater New York City area. So thank you so much for tuning in today and joining me. And I will have to say I'm a little bit under the weather, so if you hear me stop the music or if you hear me play music so I can stop and take a drink of my tea, then that's what I'm doing, just to keep it going today for you on today's episode. So we are talking about money. That's a very sensitive topic today, so I hope you're ready. Get out your notes. And don't forget to see us a little bit later over at CMajor's classroom. We do have some homework for you over there, and it's basically going to be a list. I'm basically going to just put together a checklist of things for you to think about, and it really is just based on conversations that I'm having with students, with parents, with other music makers, musician friends, you name it, anyone that's concerned about money when it comes to music making. It is a real topic. So if you're talking about spending money, if you're talking about saving it, if you're talking about finding ways to negotiate your spending when you go out to shop for an instrument, things of that nature, that's what we're talking about. And prior to today's episode, we did think that we might be talking about money on an upcoming episode, but I really thought it would have more to do with how you're going to make money in the industry. So I'm going to revisit something that I wrote about that, and that would kick off today's podcast episode. So that was way back in the summer that we mentioned that. Let me make sure I can find my notes here. And thank you again for getting up so early to hear what we have to say. Let's see, I talked about soft skills over the summer. I talked about poll results. By the way, we are going to get back to our poll results. But I just want to read this part, and then I'm going to do some brief student shout-outs, and then we're just really going to jump into our topic for today, which is to talk about money. So, we talked about chords. We talked about, let's see if I can find my notes. I'm pretty sure it was on this podcast that we talked about, because we're also over at Blog Talk Radio, so I just want to remind you of that too. If you happen to be around this evening and you care to listen to the CMajor radio show, because we will be saying some things over there about piano lessons a little bit later on this evening. So we have a morning show going, and then we have an evening show going. So let's see here. I thought I had turned to the page that I wanted to get to. It was a really important point that we made. Oh, here it is. Okay. So what I said earlier in the summer, let's see if I have a date to when I said it. Yes, we did a really big series over the summer, by the way. So if you happen to go back and listen on demand, listen to the keyboard situation, playing by chords and by color, part 4. That was really early on. So it's either part 4 or part 5 that we started to talk about money and bring up the issue of money. So our first observation when it comes to music money is what I was saying earlier in that episode. By using skills that you gain through music making, you can help sustain yourself in the workplace better. Okay, that adds up over time because you use music to help yourself become a better team player, a person who accepts criticism well, someone who can be focused and stay focused. Who knows, you may find yourself up for a promotion just because you exhibit these newfound skills and music lessons helped you do it. Okay, so we were talking about using music to help you make money, using music to help increase your worth. But today's topic is totally different. We're talking about spending money, which seems to be a more pressing issue as I continue to have conversations with all of you. So if you listen to the promo for today's show, we did sort of a mini announcement, and we said sooner or later it all comes down to money, cost, finance, expenses, investment, time, budget, future planning if you are a music maker. And if you are into learning a musical instrument, you know that music making is not cheap. It's just not. So here on CMajor Before the Show, we will start addressing some of the issues that you are telling me that are important to you. You're asking me about cost. You're wondering if you can get some sort of funding to purchase your instrument. In some cases, it's a large purchase. You are realizing the expenses that go into buying materials for your learning. Your time is important. Time is money, because why practice when you can be out earning money somewhere else? Start to think about your losses and your gains for the long run. What's your budget like? Do you want to spend $200 or $2,000, or in some cases $20,000? We are looking to help you think and overthink your future planning if you are a music maker. So thank you for joining us today, and as I said a little bit earlier, join us over at cmajorsclassroom.wordpress.com. That's starting this week, and of course this weekend, so it's Saturday, which is today. And I will be posting some things over there for you to take a look at. So one thing I do want to caution you, we are not financial experts, but we do understand something about the cost to do it all. And when the time comes, we will post information that can help you perhaps with debt, with other things that can get in the way of your music making dreams. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. We are definitely dedicated to you, understanding. We want you to understand what it takes to make it all come true. Sometimes your finances can hold you back from becoming the music maker you are supposed to be. And I don't mean that from a standpoint of you can't afford it. I just mean from a standpoint of you not understanding of all of what it takes to get all of the things that you're looking to get to become the best music maker that you can become, if that makes sense. That question keeps coming up a lot. I mean, students, parents, other musicians don't really know what they should spend their money on to be the best that they can be. And then in some cases, I've met musician friends that play at a certain level, but yet they want to play at a different level, and they think that buying a certain level instrument is going to help increase their gift, if you know what I mean. And that's always curious too. I mean, if you buy the $20,000 instrument, is it going to help you play better? I won't even answer that question. I'll just leave it as rhetorical. I'll let you answer that question. But we are dedicated to you. We're dedicated to your understanding of what it takes to make it all come true. And sometimes your finances can hold you back from becoming the music maker you're supposed to be. And in the music making world, you're going to find that it's filled with students who have different interests, a variety of passions for music making, a variety of gifts, a variety of talents. And so we're talking about music making and financial wellness pretty much today. The cost of music making and money matters, however you want to say it. And it's interesting, because I think if you just stay in your lane with where you are, with your potential for music making, you really can't go wrong. I think it's once you really understand what you need to make the best music you can make, I think you'll always stay on course. I think it's when you step outside of that boundary for yourself that you get into trouble. If you start trying to make the best music that someone else can make, I think you run into a snag. And you won't really know what that is until you've overstepped that boundary, and then you have to come back, if that makes sense. Now, before I get too intense, which I have been known to do when it comes to this topic, I'm just going to step back and give some shout outs because I'm very excited about some students that are really into their music making this week. I have a student that just switched methods, which will be a better method for his growth. So I want to give a shout out to him. Big applause, big cheers for this student because it's been a while. It's been a while that we've worked together, and finally he's at a point where he's going to take his music making seriously enough to the point that he wants to go to the next level. He really wants to grow up as opposed to growing out. I think there are two ways of growing that I've seen with my students. If you just play music that's fun all the time, and music making should be fun, but I'm talking about not making your piano lessons about method, making your piano lessons about just songs, then you're going to grow across what I call like a more lateral growth, where you're just growing basically horizontally. But if you really want to grow vertically and grow up, then I think it's worth thinking about the method that you're using and where that can really take you, which is all a part of future planning as well. So again, big shout out to that student who made that decision, and I wish you the very best, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the things that you will do with your music making, and I'm very grateful to be a part of that. And another student I want to give a shout out to. Now, this student has decided to grow laterally. She just said, you know what? I'm really not interested in taking piano lessons for years. You're not my first piano teacher, but you're the first one that really helped me to see what I'm passionate about. She has the support of her parents to do this, but she's just going to focus on learning songs. But I want to give a shout out to her because she really knows what she wants. So this week she introduced to me, and you can look this up. I'm going to be looking this up a little bit later because I'm not that familiar with this tune, but she's got me listening to Panic at the Disco. Something called This Is Gospel. But this is something that she wants to learn, and then prior to that she was learning other songs that she heard that really excited her. So big shout out to her. Again, big cheers. Because I feel like it's a good thing when you really know what you want from your own music making. She's decided she's making the best music that she can make, and it doesn't involve method so much anymore. And good luck to her. Good luck to her. I'm excited for her. Another student, pretty much on the same track. The student is learning so many old type songs from the 70s and the 80s, songs that come from different bands from the UK, and just really super excited about the music that was made during the 70s and the 80s. And so this student is learning Nobody Home by Queen. I believe that's what it's called. But it's got a really great piano part in the intro. So we're working on learning it together. Big shout out to that student. So big shout out to all of my students. I'm always excited when they come to me with things that they're excited about, because that's really what it's all about. It's not about me all the time telling you this is what you must do, this is what you should do. And in graduate school, we got away from that. We said, you know what, make the learning more directed toward the student. We talked about problem solving with music making. We talked about creativity. We talked about self-directed learning. I think it's called something else now. But it really is about what the student is excited about rather than saying you must follow and then lay it out for them. Although, I have to say, I do subscribe to the latter too, because if you are into the non-self-teaching aspects of music making, you may want something that's a little bit more laid out. And for that, see us over at the CMajor radio show, because we are a lot more formal over there on Blog Talk Radio, where we talk about piano lessons, we talk about theory, we talk about the more serious music making topics that may interest you. And over here at CMajor before the show, we are keeping things very recreational. So let's delve a little bit more into today's topic. I have a list. I think I'm going to go over that list. And then I'm going to go over some things that I've found in print that I can share with you about financing your music making. So give me a moment. I just want to take a sip of my tea, and I'll be right back. You're here on CMajor Before the Show. I'm your host, CMajor Porter. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And we have a list. We're talking about money matters today. So let me just turn down my music here, because I really want you to hear this. And think about writing down this list for yourself. It's a very casual list. There's nothing written in stone. It's just saying these are some of the topics that keep coming up over and over. Financing your keyboard, layawaying your keyboard, trading in your keyboard, upgrading your keyboard, saving up for a better keyboard, adding on to your keyboard, investing in piano methods, adding on to your keyboard. I said that twice. Buying cables for your keyboard, selling your keyboard, and repairing your keyboard, price matching your keyboard, buying keyboard piano books, purchasing a keyboard versus a piano, refurbishing an old piano, investing in piano lessons. And then more on the money end of things, believe it or not, I had this conversation recently with someone who's getting into music making. Which credit card should I get to make my purchases? I thought, wow, do I look like a financial expert? I don't think so, but hopefully I can give some insight without stepping across into another lane. Which bank should I deal with? What credit score do I need to make all the purchases I want to make? And I want to be able to buy whatever I want. Should I get 5 cards versus no cards? Should I do everything on cash basis? Whoa, these are really heavy topics. So let me just go with the first search that came to my attention. And I just looked it up. I just said, how do I spend my money? So if you just do a Google search, how should I go about my spending? You'll see some steps that are laid out for you, telling you everything from creating a budget, tracking your spending, your income, get an accurate picture of your financial situation, plan your purchases in advance, avoid impulse purchases, shop alone, pay in full and cash, don't be fooled by marketing, wait for sales and discounts, do your research. All the things that I think are so wise. I mean, there's wise spending, then there's unwise spending. So I know a little bit about something about this because I used to work a lot with musicians that were doing this very thing. They were gigging a lot and really had to think about their financial situation. With musicians, a lot of times the financial situation really revolves around how many gigs are you going to have that week. I used to have a musician friend that would brag about how many gigs they had and that they could buy whatever they wanted at the end of the week. That was them, but also at the same time, you see that person constantly switching out equipment. But that was more on the professional end. What if you're just a student and you're thinking, should I buy that mini keyboard that I saw on sale for $44? Or should I go ahead and buy the $100 keyboard? Or do I just forget anything that I can plug into a wall and just say, forget it, I'm going to buy an acoustic piano, or I'm going to rent one? That's the other thing. You don't have to buy pianos anymore. You can rent them. So we live in a time where pianos are being thrown from a crane and they come crashing to the ground, falling to a million splinters, that the value of the piano has changed so much over the years, but still we have the access to purchasing quality pianos, a quality instrument for you to learn on. So really think about how you want to do that. I've seen recently in the last couple of years where pianos were put on display in a mall, for instance, for you to consider putting together some sort of plan to either acquire that instrument or rent that instrument. So you just have to decide if you're going to do something short term or for the long term. It's a lot of decision making that you will need to make. Plan your purchases in advance. I really agree with that. I had a musician friend that would never buy anything on impulse. That person would always plan 3-6 months ahead, keep asking questions, keep asking the same questions, waiting, avoiding impulse purchases. And then, of course, you have musicians that buy things impulsively, so they really respond to those ads that marketers have put in front of them, and then, boom, before you know it, they're spending their rent money to buy an instrument. Is that wise or not? Only if you know your situation. Shop alone. Now, this one I have to agree with, that if you come with friends, they're going to influence your purchase. If you come with family, they're going to influence your purchase because they're not you. So they don't really know what your needs are, and they may just say, buy the one that looks the best. So they may pick cosmetics over function. That's something to think about too. Pay in full and in cash. I would agree with this if you can. But believe it or not, you have a lot of musicians that think that if they just get that credit card that will allow them to make the purchase, they can pay it back because they know they have gigs coming up, they can cover it. But I've seen everything from the black card to musicians that apply for financing right on the spot and they get it and then they make the purchase, and then either they honor the payments depending on what the deal was with the credit card company, or they fall back on the payments and then they lose the card. So it's just a lot out there to really consider. You have to know your situation. You have to know your discipline and so forth. Don't be fooled by marketing. I just said something about that. Sometimes there's advertisement involved that will say, this will do this will do that. You're really attracted to the lights, so to speak, the features and benefits of what this instrument can do. Wait for sales and discounts. I would agree for that. I would agree with that. If you can wait for a sale, if you can wait for a discount, and then do your research. That's just comparative shopping, which is always a wise thing to do. So anyone can do this. Just look up, literally Google search, how should I go about my spending? And then if I can remember to post this over at CMajor's Classroom, I'll post that. That's how we did our search. So everything from how to spend your money wisely, they're showing you pictures, the budget rules, how much of your paycheck should you spend, and how should you control your spending. That's all really left up to the experts when it comes to debt, when it comes to credit, when it comes to budgeting. There's so much information that's out there that financial experts can give you. But to be honest, I really didn't know how much of a pressing issue this really was with some of my students, some of my friends, some of the parents that I talk to, some of the adults getting into music making. They are very concerned with learning a musical instrument, but not quite sure of how much money they should put into it. So in one of my favorite books that I like to pull from, there is a question: how much will it all cost? That's really up to you. I mean, this is a guide for adults, for adult learners, music makers of all ages, but especially to adults. Let me just talk to the adults who are thinking about taking up a musical instrument for the first time, or who are picking up from where they left off while you were at school. So it really addresses the questions that may be in the mind of you. You are going to be the learner. So again, not that I'm trying to not talk to all students, but I really want to address the adults, because I see this happening a lot of adults that wanted to make music making their goal. It's their lifelong dream to do this, and they're coming back into it. So which instrument should I choose? How do I find a good teacher? Will I be able to do it? Will learning music be too hard for me? And how much will it all cost? So learning an instrument from scratch or resuming music lessons is one of the most absorbing and exciting things that anyone can do. And you shouldn't be afraid of it. There are so many rewards to music making. It's not something to be afraid of. I think that you can win at music making if you really try. But that big question, which instrument should you choose? And in the case of CMajor Before the Show and the CMajor Radio Show, we are talking about the piano. So should you choose an acoustic piano to learn on? Or should you choose a keyboard? Let me just stop right there. I'm going to play a sample for you. And I hope that if you have GarageBand, you can pull up the same sample. And I hope that it plays properly. Let me just make sure that I solo the track real quick. But why I wanted to play this is that you get a sense of how a piano can sound through software, which I've talked a little bit about in the past. And the reason I bring this up because I had an adult student that chose to have piano lessons but did not use a real piano, used a keyboard because he wanted to play from the best sounding piano he could play from in his lessons and had some of the best speakers that the sound was coming through. That was motivating to him, as opposed to the student that has a real piano that has to worry about getting it tuned and so forth. And then the adult student that I'm speaking about is complaining about the fact that it's out of tune and so forth. So you really have to decide that for yourself too. Is it going to bother you to play an instrument that will need tuning, or do you really want to go with a controller in some cases, a keyboard controller, or a keyboard? Okay, so let me just play this down here. Let's see if you can hear that piano sound. Okay, so I'm going to stop that sample for a moment. So I don't know if you heard that, if you would think you were listening to a real piano, if you were realizing you're listening to something that's virtual. So you can decide that. If you want to go with virtual instruments, virtual sounds, then that's a different investment. So I would just recommend going to your nearest retailer, having that conversation with a salesperson, and then move over to a manager, an assistant manager, in some cases a store manager that's friendly enough that will have that conversation with you about your future planning for music making, what you should be spending your money on, and so forth. Because if you really jump into technology and all of the wonderful things that technology can offer, you may find yourself going that route. Let me just say this, music making has changed so much over the last decade that it's so easy for anyone to really jump into music making now. You just have to decide what you're going to do with it once you jump in. So music technology may be worth jumping into. Let me just say it like that. Okay, so which instrument should you choose? The question leaves open the option for virtual instruments, really. So you don't have to choose a piano. You can choose a piano sound that you want to work with, something that's going to keep you happy. I have some students now that they are using a keyboard, but they're much happier when they're playing on a bright piano sound versus a sound that's a little bit more mellow. How do I find a good teacher? Now, I'm going to say something that is leading edge. Let me say it that way. That's the politically correct way to say it, leading edge. But what I'm finding is that students nowadays, with the help of social media, are using Alexa to teach them. In some cases, Alexa becomes the teacher. But I know what they're saying here. How do you find a good teacher? That's a good question. And then how much do you want to pay to work with that teacher? So sometimes if you just Google search piano teacher and then put in a zip code for your area, what you're going to see, you'll see a list of teachers that have allowed their information to be out there in that way. But those teachers may or may not be good for you. So that's an interesting question. I mean, a good teacher is the one that really helps you do what you're trying to do. And you really have to be clear about that. Now, if you don't have a clue of what you want to do, then find any teacher and just go along with their program and learn as much as you can. That would be my recommendation there. How much should you pay? I really think that depends on your area. I can't say to you, you're going to pay $50 for a half-hour lesson. I can't say that because that number changes. I recently met someone that lives in the Southeast, for instance. We're here in the Northeast. Here in the greater New York City area, I've even seen it where teachers charge $100 for a half-hour lesson. Or they charge $200 to teach you for 2 hours. But here's the deal. You have to take from them for 2 hours. But they have their way of crafting the lessons so that you play for the whole hour. The first hour, you just play. That's it. And then the second hour, you go in and start fine-tuning, really making better sense of what you just did in the first hour. That's another way of working. So you just have to be really clear. So you can end up spending $200 a week on lessons, which comes to $800 a month, things like that. So you really have to think about how you're going to be spending for your music making, and if you're going to make it short term, if you're going to make it long term. Another conversation I recently had was one music professional won't even deal with you if you consistently miss lessons, which makes them miss their bottom line, which makes them say, okay, we won't be able to work with you at this studio, and thank you for coming. And we can recommend someone else that will offer short-term lessons so that maybe you can go that route. But at the same time, I think that you have to ask that question. Are you going to be making music over the long term? If you're stepping out of the self-teaching arena, how long do you want to work with a teacher? And then I've had conversations with even music professionals that have degrees. They've gone on to do successful music making as a profession, but they keep coming back to the need to have someone there helping them, that they don't see music as self-teaching at all. They see that they were always going to need a teacher. They're always going to keep someone around who can give them instruction, give them guidance, give them advice. Does this sound right in this piece that I'm playing? Is the phrasing correct? Things like that. So you just have to decide that. But again, this really is for adults who are taking up a musical instrument for the first time and who are picking up from where they left off. So we're talking within that context today. Will learning music be too hard for me? That's the other thing I was saying. I just want to say this really gently. I had a friend that thought that making the biggest purchase would also give the biggest result for the music making. I'm not sure if that's true. But let me just say this, that even if you play something simply on the least expensive instrument and then try to play that same song on the most expensive instrument, will you sound better? Will you sound different in terms of your technique? And I think this person thought their technique would change just because they had the more expensive instrument. It really was an interesting observation to say, oh, now that I have this, now that I've spent thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars more, I'm going to be a better music maker. I don't really know how to respond to that, because I feel like if you're at a certain level with your gift, then the way to become better is just to grow in your music making. And then it won't matter if you're playing on that less expensive instrument versus the one that's more expensive. But I could see where the person was going. They wanted to have the best of everything to make sure when they got to that level of music making that they would sound like, and fill in the blank, their favorite artist, their favorite technical player. Let's just say it that way. Okay, I'm really trying to watch my words here because I don't want to step over into that area of saying things that that discourage. Let me say it that way. The music maker, first time music maker. How much will it all cost? As we're talking about today. So the costs have changed over the years. Again, you don't know if you're going to be spending $25 for a half-hour lesson, if you're going to be spending $50 for a half-hour lesson, if you're going to be spending more than that. But it all adds up. So put together a nice budget for yourself. Include lessons, include the expense of what it would cost to maintain an instrument if you have an acoustic instrument. Consider the tuning costs. Consider if you get a keyboard, if it's something that's going to last. Technology tends to improve upon technology. So that same keyboard that you used 10 years ago may need to be upgraded. And will you be able to trade in what you have to get something more modern? So think about those issues. Okay, so then we're going to skip over to this other part in the book that talks about finance. So the question of finance, and I'm really just going to read straight from this book. So again, if you ever have any questions about what we are using here on the podcast to refer to, let me know. I'll be happy to list it for you or tell you where you can find the same information so you can read it for yourself. And this really is a practical matter. So most new hobbies or interests involve a financial outlay of some sort. It is as well to give that and other practical matters some thought before you start to ease your passage on the journey that you are about to begin. It's also important to try and narrow down the style or genre of music you want to play. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're basically going to go through some bullet points, and then we're going to go through some suggestions. So what I'm going to do now is turn up my music. I'm going to take a little bit more sip of my tea as we are nearing the first hour of our discussion of how should you spend your money when it comes to music making. And I will be right back. You're here with CMajor on CMajor Before the Show. We're talking about money today and today's topic. And just think about if you are an adult music maker. You're an adult. You're delving into music making for the first time. You know what type of music you particularly like to listen to. Do you want to play songs from musicals? For instance, I have a student that's really into musicals, like everything from Hello Dolly to something else, Hamilton, Cats, you name it. He wants to play all of that music. And so, even though that student is not an adult, but still, I also have adult students that want to play all of the music from the Charlie Brown specials, for instance, all of the music of Vince Guaraldi. So, is that the sort of music you would like to play? You have to think about that as opposed to classical music. I haven't quite figured out yet why some of my students just won't even touch a piece by Mozart, that they find Mozart boring. But I like Mozart. That's just me. But again, you just have to help them to see what it is they really want to do on the instrument that they are trying to do it on. Have you tried listening to a broad range of music to be sure about what you like? Have you talked about your idea of learning an instrument with your family, with your friends? And most importantly, which goes along with today's topic, do you have a budget in mind for your exploration of practical music making? So, this book really tries to get you to think about when you start to learn a musical instrument, that you are making a commitment of sorts. It's not something that you're going to just throw away in the next week. So we are dedicated here on CMajor Before the Show with helping you with that commitment. That's what we're doing here. And then the overarching question that we try to throw out every once in a while is, how much of music is self-teaching? Because that also impacts how much money you will be spending as well. Are you going to be investing in a teacher, or will you be investing in methods? Or will you just turn on your music subscription service and just start learning? I had a musician friend who was self-taught all the way. And this person would always say to me, I've played with the best. I've played with James Brown. I've played with Parliament Funkadelic. I played with, and then he would just go into list other artists. But what this person was saying is, I turned on the music that was recorded and I played along, and I was able to find my way into the music. And then when I went to a real gig, I was successful. So sometimes that works for others, sometimes it doesn't. I had a student that said to me recently they would never be able to do that. What would I do if I turned on the music? I wouldn't be able to understand what to play along to. But then I had someone else who said to me recently, I just started to learn to play the piano. This person was a senior person saying that they learned to play the piano just by listening to music that they heard on their listening device. I can't even say radio anymore because everyone listens to music on their phone, on their mobile devices, whatever the case may be. Alexa, play, and then you fill in the blank. Siri, get me my music list, my song list. So you have access to so many ways to learn a music instrument in the first place. So embarking on learning a musical instrument may represent a significant financial commitment, although there can be little doubt that the benefits should far outweigh the expense. And I would say that's true. There's so many benefits. We were talking about some of those a few weeks back. We talked about the wellness aspect of music making. We will revisit that topic, by the way, because it's something that's going to be ongoing in this podcast. So, however, it may help if you give some thought to the following costs, any of which you are likely to incur. So along with this other list that I just made about financing your keyboard, laying away in your keyboard, that's a little bit more specific to the purchase. But this talks about, in terms of the finance, payment for lessons, hiring or buying an instrument. So there's the whole question again of renting or buying an instrument. Buying a music stand. That's the other thing. If you buy a keyboard, 9 times out of 10, that keyboard will come with a music rest. But here's the thing. If you buy a professional level keyboard, you won't have a music rest. There's just not one built in. So you would need to purchase a stand to put your music on if you prefer reading your music. Because a lot of times with professional keyboards, they don't have speakers built in, and then you have to use the connections on the keyboard to hear audio out. Buying sheet music. That's true. Now I have a student right now who's very unhappy with the need to purchase sheet music. Let me just say it that way. That they think all sheet music should be free at this point. That's their point of view. But if you go online and you are obeying the copyright laws and you pay the $5 or $6, the $4 or $5 or $6, in some cases $3, to buy the sheet music, that really is the right thing to do. But if you try to screen capture some of the sheet music that's online, then you're going to get a watermark, and, if you don't mind that. But I've had some students that will do that too. Now, let's say if you were thinking about playing an instrument outside of piano, then there are other accessories that you will need to add on to that instrument. So think about that. And then maintaining tuning of the instrument. And that's in the case of having an acoustic instrument. If you have one that you just plug into a wall, you don't have to worry about the tuning so much. But you can change the tuning on the instrument. We have talked a little bit about that. Maintenance of the instrument. That's only if you need to have that instrument repaired in some cases. So let's talk about that for a moment. That definitely costs. So I'm not going to go as far as to give you figures. I think that you can look things up for yourself. But I will give you something to think about. So let's say if you have an acoustic piano, things could fall on that piano. The piano needs to be tuned. Some people say once a year. Some people say every 3 months. Some people say twice a year. Find out from your local person what they think about your piano being tuned. Sometimes the piano goes out of tune more often than someone else's piano because of where you have it located. So you have to think about the environment that you're keeping it in. If you have the piano that's near a place where there's a lot of humidity, I have students that have a lot of water in their home. That can definitely affect the way the piano is staying tuned. Getting the piano restored or repaired, that can cost thousands of dollars. So let's say someone gave you a piano, like an old piano from the late 1800s or the early 1900s, and you want to have it restored. Oh, I have a piano now. They no longer make that piano. That piano company has gone through so many transitions that you can't even find the piano maker any longer. Then that's definitely a case where you have to do your research, and then you have to decide, okay, do I want this big thing in my house? Even if it's a baby grand or an acoustic, whatever the case may be, do I want this big old thing in my house that doesn't even play correctly? What am I going to do? I will say this, and we did some research on piano restoration. You can spend thousands of dollars to make that piano look brand new all over again, but the pictures are beautiful, but will it play the way that you need it to play? Or can you just do something simple like remove the key bed, have somebody dust it off, replace the key bed, and see if the keys work, if it's in the case of something that's really old and dusty? That may end up costing you hundreds of dollars as opposed to thousands of dollars. Something like that you need to think about. We can talk more about maintenance and tuning of the instrument, but I think we may even leave that for a separate podcast. Also, another question. Once you learn to play the piano, once you learn to play a keyboard, are you going to want to join a band, or will you want to stay solo? How is your music making going to be used? Will you be using your skills in the community as someone who's out there offering their gift? Or will you just play for personal enjoyment? Will you just keep it for yourself? Attending a music program. So let's say if you are taking private lessons, but at the same time you enjoy the social aspects of music making, you want to make music in a group, and so you decide to sign up for group lessons somewhere, you can certainly do that. Now, here's my other favorite thing I love, because as you are taking lessons, as you are learning about all it takes to make music on your instrument, it also helps some time to subscribe to publications that can motivate you. So I've posted a couple of times already over at my Facebook page. If you happen to look over there, CMajor Before the Show on Facebook. Sometimes our podcast episodes appear over there. Sometimes they don't. But I try to keep it updated as much as possible. But look at some of the things that I've posted over there, because there are publications online that are very motivating, that encourage you to keep your music making going, and give you suggestions of how to keep your piano skills up. And everything costs money. Everything costs. Subscribing to a music journal, subscribing for a music association. Now that's interesting. So you may find a music association in your community that you can become a part of, where you can exchange ideas. And let's say if you decide to go the online route, you may just decide to go online and just join a Facebook group or some other group where you can exchange ideas. There are certainly musicians groups online that help each other with finding gigs and so forth. And then looking further ahead, let's say if you really get into music making, are you going to want to enter exams? Are you going to be looking to take part in competitions? Are you going to be ready to take part in a festival, for instance? That's definitely thinking further down the line. Here's the other thing. When you start to really do well, let's say if you get to that point, you feel confident enough to start putting on concerts, working with your community planners to plan a concert. What are you going to wear? You're going to be seen. In the case of social media, everything gets Instagrammed and Facebooked and tweeted nowadays. So you just have to be careful of how you're seen in public, because that really matters, what you're wearing. If you're wearing the correct colors and things like that, wearing the correct outfits. Now, in the case of local music making, where there are just open mics and other casual performance opportunities, you can just wear everyday clothing. But if you decide to really put yourself in a place where you can be seen by up to 500 people, for instance, on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, then I would say it's worth it to think about what you're going to wear for your performance. Holiday courses. Not really sure what that means. Unless they have a Christmas special on piano lessons, I don't know. Concert tours. Certainly how to get to and from lessons and rehearsals, that's a concern. Or in the case of having someone come to you for lessons. And then your time. Now, we definitely talked about that. We mentioned that in the promo, that your time is important. Are you going to be able to put in the time to practice? Or will you see that as taking time away from your other opportunities to make money? Why spend time practicing when you can be out earning money? So I have musician friends that will say that too, that they just rehearse when it's time to rehearse with their band. They don't bother practicing beforehand. They just jump in and just start making music. So you just have to decide how you're going to manage it all. On the plus side, you will benefit from your encounter with music making, no matter how brief. You will develop a range of transferable skills, including improvement in cooperation, concentration, listening, and coordination, and also fine motor skills, and you will almost certainly develop new friendship groups. There is substantial evidence from research to show that participating in music is beneficial to health and well-being in a variety of ways. Again, we talked about this a few weeks back. If you can, listen to our wellness episode. We addressed this. We will be addressing it again in the future. Instrumental lessons are usually provided at your music teacher's home, although some teachers may be willing to travel to your address if you have a suitable space for the lesson to take place. Okay, now that I can really speak to. I think I would need to spend another episode on that, what's considered quote-unquote suitable. Because if you're a traveling piano teacher, you're going to find that almost every space that you go into outside of a studio space to give a lesson, that there will be some sort of distractions that that's what you're walking into. It could be the distraction of a pet. It could be the distraction of other electronics going on in the home, conversations, you name it. Just so many distractions. So that impacts the issue of whether or not it's suitable to have lessons in a person's home or not, as opposed to having them come to a studio. Of course, if you're learning the piano, you probably don't have too much choice about where your instrument will be located within your house. If, on the other hand, you are learning a woodwind, a brass, or a stringed instrument, you may be able to play it in a number of different rooms and take care not to annoy your neighbors. It can be well worthwhile exploring the acoustic response from different rooms. So they're talking about other instruments, but let's just stay with the piano. So I might have mentioned this before in a previous episode, that sometimes that pedal in the middle becomes a silent mechanism for your piano. So it will mute the playing so that you can either just play softly for yourself and go through the motions of playing the song. But again, if you're the type of person that really gets motivated by the sound, then that may not be enough to you. But it really depends on where you live. If you have the opportunity to play outwardly and make as much music as you can. I will say this, in the greater New York City area is so much more difficult to express yourself in a small space when you have close space living. So think about that too. Where are you going to practice? Where are you going to rehearse? In this case, it may be worth it to invest in something that you can plug into a wall, something you can connect to your computer and then put on headphones and just lose yourself in the sound, lose yourself in the world of playing that way. The only other compromise would be now you're not playing on something acoustic and you really want to invest in the feel. So investing in the feel of a real piano does take hundreds and thousands of dollars. I will say that. Because the other option is to play on something that just has more of a synth feel, or what they call a semi-weighted feel, or just a non-weighted feel. It won't feel like a grand piano. That's the other thing to think about. Okay, there are other things you can say about the design of the home. I'm going to skip over that. And let's just go into buying or renting an instrument. So before purchasing a new or second-hand instrument, it is essential to try it out. There can be a world of difference between one model of an instrument and another in terms of cost and also in terms of sound and ease of sound production. Some instruments speak more easily for no truly apparent reason. In any event, never buy or rent an instrument without first consulting your teacher. Some teachers may have preferences for one make of an instrument over another, while some may not be willing to teach on a particular make of instrument. Borrowing somebody's instrument. Okay, then it goes on to say something about that. Buying a second-hand instrument. I think we're going to have to put together a part 2. I think we are. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop right here with today's episode. I've given you a lot of things to think about without saying actual figures for what it's going to cost for you to finance your keyboard. I haven't said anything about the actual figures of that. So I'm not going to go into whether or not you should go ahead and get that card that's going to charge you X number of percent interest. I'm not going to say anything about that. The laying away process, I'm not really going to go through that. Again, we aren't financial experts, but if you get in contact with me offline, I can definitely say more about these topics. So I think I've given you enough food for thought. And just look for my list a little bit later. It may not be this morning that I post it. It may not be this afternoon. It may be more towards the evening. But just keep an eye out for that. And so it will appear in 3 places. I will put it on CMajorsClassroom.wordpress.com for you to view. And then I will also post it again over on our Facebook social media page for CMajor before the show. So see us over there a little bit later. And then Twitter. I'll just post the link. And it's basically a list. It's just part of the blogging that I do online and any other links that I think will be helpful to you. If this keeps going in this direction, let me just say this. We may even have to get well, I don't want to speak too far in advance, but we may have to get a site that's devoted to this issue. I think it's an important topic. I didn't think I would talk about music and money so much, but it is an important aspect of music making because you have to spend money at some point. Unless everything is given to you, unless you have a benefactor that will just reward you with every single thing that you need to make music. You may be in that situation too, if you're fortunate enough to be in that situation. Or you may not even have to think about the spending at all. You may already just have a limitless budget of just getting whatever you need. In that case, go for it. If you are attached to some source that will allow you just to buy whatever you want, whenever you want, and make the best music you can make, because at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. So thank you so much for joining us today here on CMajor Before the Show. It's always a great pleasure to have you here, and sooner or later, it did come down to the money. We've talked today about cost, we talked about finance, we talked about expenses, we talked about investment, we talked about time, we talked about budget, we've talked about future planning. We did speak to mainly adults today as the music makers that are making all of these decisions. I did give some shout outs to my students who are non-adults, and they have parents that make the decisions for them when it comes to all the topics we just mentioned. But whatever the case may be, you are into learning a musical instrument, and you know that music making is costly. It's not something that you get to do for free. So here on CMajor Before the Show, we want to thank you for letting us address some of these issues that you are telling me that are important to you, that you've been asking me about the cost to do certain things, and you've been wondering what it would take to purchase your instrument. You've been wondering if it should be a large purchase or if it should be a small purchase. So we respect your time. We value the time that you're putting into music making. And if there's anything that we can say to help along with that, please let us know. Get in touch with us on social media right now. We are building ourselves back up over at Twitter at CMajor Porter 1. And then if you happen to look on Facebook, look for us over at CMajor Before the Show and just see what we post over there. We post as often as we can, and then see us over at our blog post, which is cmajorsclassroom.wordpress.com, because a lot of the homework assignments that we give here on this podcast will appear over there. And just think about in the meantime, how much do you want to spend for your music making just to start? Are you more in that $200 category? Are you more in the $2,000 category? Or in some cases, are you more in the $20,000 category for your music making? So whatever the case may be, again, we're looking to help you think and overthink your planning so you can come to some sort of conclusion that works best for you. Thank you for joining us. We will see you again right here next week. And just to give you an idea of what we will talk about next week, you know that holiday guide that we went over? I think that was last week. We're going to do a part 2. I'm very excited about that because I think we listed some of the more traditional songs, but now we feel the need to say more about holiday music that's out there, that's more 20th and 21st century, toward the end of the 20th century, more 21st century, when it comes to holiday music. So I hope you don't mind that. I know that there are some listeners that may not even celebrate Christmas at all, but we can certainly use the word holiday. Why don't we just say it like that? Holiday music for anyone who's interested in playing holiday tunes. So we will give another holiday guide that can help you with your music making, songs that you may decide to play on your keyboard or your piano. So listen for that on next week. Thank you again for joining us. If you're in the greater New York City area, please keep warm. It is sunny outside, but it's really, really cold in the 30s and some places the 20s if you are in the northern area of New York. So have a great day. Get outside if you can and make some music while you're keeping warm. And if you're inside, make some music. Turn on your computer, find a program that will motivate you. Turn on your music subscription service. Listen to some tunes that motivate you to make the best music you can make. Take care, and I'll see you right here next week.